Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about Azure Private Endpoint Name Resolution. I'm joined by Adam and Connor from our team who'll be showing us some demos and what it looks like. What we're going to do is look at how private endpoints work, looking at it from the DNS zones. How do you resolve those private endpoints for those PaaS resources, and also how do you resolve those from on-premises networks? Okay, as you can see in our diagram below, we're going to show and demo all this working environment from Adam and Connor, but I'll just quickly take you through what's happening here. We've got our private DNS zones. That's where the records are for our private endpoints. We've got storage accounts set up for the private endpoint, which is linked to a network. We've got a virtual machine. We'll use that for resolving that private endpoint. And on the on the on-premises side, we've got a domain controller with conditional forwarders set up to point to the Private DNS Resolver, which is a service in Azure, to go and get those private endpoint IP addresses back for us. And we'll show you that working as well. Now, the Private DNS Resolver itself is a service. There are other ways you could add a server in there with a DNS service on there. You could use AD, you could use ADDS, you could also use an Azure firewall as well, but we're going to use the Private DNS Resolver in this example. So let's get straight to it and switch to, let's take a look at the Azure side and look at those resources. Let's look at the Private DNS Resolver and the zones and the private endpoint and storage account, Connor.
Yeah, so let's take a look at our Private DNS Resolver here. So we'll go and set up here. And so two main components of a Private DNS Resolver are these two sections here in this, you can see in this overview page, the inbound endpoint and the outbound endpoint. And so that's going to allow you to resolve your DNS, your private DNS on inbound resolution, so from your on-prem into your Azure, or outbound, so out from your Azure out onto your on-prem. So let's take a look at these. So with our inbound, here's our IP address for our inbound resolution. Remember this, we're going to see this later on when we go on-prem. And we have also a subnet as well. This is tied to. With outbound, this is also again tied to a subnet, but has a rule set associated with it. So this is rules that, if we take a look in here, we can see this goes down to our on-prem. So again, this allows us to go down to our on-prem and resolve anything we want down there. And we also have virtual network links in here as well.
Yeah, and we can also use that outbound one to resolve other services. So you may have other DNS services outside of Azure. You can then add that to your outbound endpoints here as well. So if you're not using that, I would suggest you can just delete the outbound, because you do pay for the service, one for your inbound and one for outbound. So if you only need it for inbound, just use the inbound section. And the whole point of this is it creates a private resource that you can use to do that DNS resolution. So that's great. Kind of, we've seen that. We can see that it's in our private network there using that subnet section there, and we did capture that IP address. If you just click on inbound again, so we can see that IP address 10.63.0.4, and we'll see where that comes into play later. So now if we look at the DNS zone, so actually, let's look at the storage account. Let's take a look at the storage account and the private endpoint.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so we've just got a kind of very standard basic storage account set up here. Our main interesting bit is over here in networking. So yep, we've got the public network access disabled for this. And what we do have is a private endpoint connection set up. So we have a couple set up here. We have one set up that is into the production or in Azure. So we can resolve this and access the storage account from in Azure, as we also have one here that goes to our hub network. So anything coming in from our VPN can access it through that private endpoint.
Okay, cool. And now let's take a look at the private DNS zone, and we should see corresponding records for this storage account in there.
Yeah, so we jump over here. We'll see this one here. That's privatelink.blob.core.windows.net. And we can see record sets. Yeah, there we are.
Great.
We see our SA productions.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've got that one record, and now we can see the IP address of that storage account is 10.60.0.132. I'm just about to see that there. what that is telling us is that if we want to access that storage account, we can't get it via the public endpoint anymore because we've locked it down. It's only available by the 132 IP address. So now if we take a look at your, I guess you've got a virtual machine in Azure, so let's do a name resolution on that.
Yeah, of course, let's hop over to that. So yeah, we're hopped over here into the VM in Azure. And so yeah, we're just going to do an NSLOOKUP of the storage account DNS name. So I've already typed it in previously here. So here we go.
So you can see that's the public URL of the machine, of the storage account in this case. And it's come back with the private IP address of that storage account. And you can see the name is also the private link.blob.core.windows.net. So it's come back with the private link. Now, the way it's done that, it's gone off to the wire server, which I think that's the IP address in there in Azure. And because that zone is linked to that production network as well. So it's worth just having a quick look at that, the link between the zone and the network that your VM is on, Connor. So can we see that quickly?
Yeah, of course. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, so if we're back over here, we can take a look at our virtual network links. In this case, we've got it linked to kind of everywhere. But yeah, we can see it's linked to that production.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So you can see that if I go back now to the diagram. Thank you, Connor, very much for that. I'll flip off here. So we can see from that, that's the DNS zone linked to the production network. We've seen the storage account private endpoint, and we've done a resolution using the public name of the storage account, and it's come back and given us the private IP address using NSLOOKUP. That's exactly how you'd want that to work. Now, in that scenario, we're not even using the Private DNS Resolver because this has got a direct connection via the wire server to this here. Now, if we flip over to the on-premises side, thank you very much, Connor. Let's bring Adam back and let's flip to the on-premises side and see how this part is working here. So we'll do that next. Okay, Adam. So let's flip over to your side. If you want to share your screen, and we'll take it from your side.
Okay, so we're back on our domain controller here. So this is on our on-premise network. And connected over the VPN to our Azure environment. So we'll just have a look at the IP address here. So we can see the local IP address is 10.0.255.5. So we'll just do an NSLOOKUP for the name of the storage account, and we'll see what comes back with that for now. Okay, so at the moment we can see the public IP address coming back for that account. We do have public access disabled, so if we tried going to that account at the moment, we wouldn't be able to access it, but just because it was enabled before, that record's sort of still lingering on the DNS servers. So what we're going to do now is we'll jump over to the DNS console for this DC, and then we'll actually add in those conditional forwarders. So we'll get that loaded up now. So at the moment, we can see there's no conditional forwarders in here at all. So what we'd want to do is if we just right-click on here, and we do new conditional forwarder. For the DNS name, you want the name of the DNS zone in Azure. So in this case, that will be blob.core.windows.net. And for the IP address here, we want the private IP of the DNS Resolver endpoint. So in this case, that's 10.63.0.4. And once we add that in here, we'll be able to see it go green because it can establish connectivity to that endpoint over the VPN. We'll also tick this box. This is a standalone domain controller, but if you had sort of multiple controllers that are on your domain, that would replicate the DNS records to those controllers as well. And then we'll go ahead and add that in. So now that conditional forward is added, we should be sending all those DNS lookups to the DNS Resolver in Azure. So we're just going to jump onto the workstation VM that we've got set up, and then we can see that resolving. Okay, so we're on the workstation VM now. So what we'll do is we'll open up a terminal session, and we'll do another NSLOOKUP here. And if we do an NSLOOKUP now, we can see that we're going to our local DNS server on the DC. And then we're getting a response back of the private IP address for the private endpoint on that storage account in Azure. So that's exactly what we want. So now when we're trying to do these lookups from on-prem and connect to these Azure services, we're actually going over the VPN, and we've got those private IP addresses.
Brilliant.
Ash, what's the
Yeah.
reason that we sort of put those conditional forwarders in place? I mean, I know we've seen customers do it slightly differently, but what's the benefit of the conditional forwarder specifically?
Right. So the benefit of using those conditional forwarders is what it's doing is basically offloading those zones to the private DNS resolver. That will then go and find the zones and the records in there and just bring back the results. What some people do or were doing, I don't know if they still do it, is set each of those A records up manually on their on-premises domains. So when they create a new private endpoint, they create a manual record, they create a zone and put a record underneath it, and it will work, and that's perfectly fine. But it's not as efficient as just sending any request to blob.co.windows.net. Just send that off to the private DNS resolver, and that will go and get the results for you without you having to manage and maintain all those A records, which can get in a mess and they can get wrong. So it's just best to let the system manage it for you. So what you do need to do is make sure those zones are kept tidy, and when you're looking at your DNS zones, doing any troubleshooting, start there, start in your DNS zone, make sure that zone record is correct, is going to the correct private endpoint for the correct resource, and then also make sure you're getting you've got SA Production QKS, make sure you haven't got any typos in there, you've got the right domain name at the end of it, and yeah, should be fine. So thanks very much, Adam. Thanks, Connor. We had a good demo there, and we could see each of the steps of, what that private endpoint looks like, looking at the A record, the DNS zone link. We looked at how to resolve that private endpoint from both from the Azure side and also from the on-prem side. We took a look at the private DNS resolver and the conditional forwarders from the DC to the private DNS resolver, and also we did the test from the workstation, which goes to the DC, to the private DNS resolver, and back to the workstation, pulling out and sending back the actual internal IP, which then allows us to lock down the internet part of those PAS resources. In this case, we use a storage account, but it could also be something like a SQL server and various other PAS resources. So that's kind of a demo of how we would set that private DNS up and how the resolution works. So hopefully you found that useful. You might find that useful for your troubleshooting as well. But any questions, give us a shout, drop us a comment, or get in touch via our website, and follow us on YouTube if you like the video and found it useful. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.